I woke up that morning like any other, the sunlight sneaking through the blinds and landing across the kitchen table where my mug of coffee was already steaming. The aroma hit me first, bitter, warm, the kind of smell that usually makes mornings feel alive, but today it felt like a background noise, a calm hum under something heavier. I scrolled through my phone, a small pang of excitement in my chest when I saw the date. Mom's birthday was today. I wanted it to feel special, something that she'd remember. Maybe a nice dinner, a little gesture, nothing huge, just enough to show her she mattered. Dad was sitting across from me, newspaper folded but eyes sharp, scanning over the pages as if they contained all the secrets he needed to keep. When I mentioned my plans in passing, the way I usually do, his brow furrowed ever so slightly. "You know we can't just throw money around," he said, voice calm but with a sharp edge. I tried to nod, tried to smile through it, but the words lingered like smoke. It wasn't just about the money, it never really was. There was this weight, a reminder that no matter how small or thoughtful my plans, they always seemed to land somewhere heavy with judgment. I sipped my coffee, the warmth barely reaching the tight knot in my chest. My fingers tapped the edge of the table, restless, a tiny rebellion against the day that already felt like it had rules I didn't agree with. The phone buzzed again, another reminder about Mom's dinner, and I realized how much I was holding back, trying not to upset the balance, trying not to push too hard. I just wanted her birthday to feel special. Is that too much? I thought, staring at the sunlight dancing on the floor. The question hung there, unanswered, as I watched Dad go back to his paper, the silence thick but not uncomfortable, just heavy. Even the ordinary sounds of the house seemed louder today. The hum of the fridge, the distant car passing by outside, the creak of the floorboards as Mom moved in another room. All of it reminded me of the little tensions, the things left unsaid, the way love sometimes came wrapped in restraint. It was a quiet day, calm on the surface, but under it was this subtle frustration, this feeling that even the simplest intention could somehow turn complicated. I pushed down a sigh and kept planning in my head, knowing that if I wanted this birthday to matter, I might have to take the weight of the world on my own. That I spent the rest of the morning thinking about Mom, imagining her face when she realized someone had gone out of their way for her. It's funny how you can carry someone else's happiness in your chest like it's a fragile glass you're terrified of dropping. I swiped through restaurants on my phone, scrolling past fancy places I couldn't afford, little cafes I remembered from childhood, even that tiny bistro Mom always mentioned she wanted to try but never did. Each one made my chest tighten a little, because the thought of giving her something special shouldn't feel like a negotiation with reality. I pictured her sitting across from me at a table set with candles that flickered just right, the smell of roasted chicken, or maybe something with her favorite herbs wafting through the air. I imagined her laughing, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, the way she always tilts her head when something tickles her fancy. And then, like clockwork, the thought of Dad crept back in. I could almost hear him saying no before I even had the chance to ask. That tightness in my chest returned, heavy and familiar. She deserves something nice, but Dad already said no. Why does it always have to be like this? I whispered the thought to myself, half in frustration, half in disbelief, staring at the soft glow of the phone screen in the quiet kitchen. I tried jotting down ideas in my notebook, the pen scratching against the page, a small act that somehow felt like rebellion. Maybe a reservation. Maybe I could cook something myself. Maybe I'd find a way to make this birthday hers, not his rules. The thought of secrecy even crossed my mind. What if I could pull it off without him noticing? Until the moment it mattered, my heart beat a little faster, and for the first time that day, excitement mingled with the anxiety twisting in my stomach. Even the little things seemed loaded now. The smell of coffee, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside, they all felt magnified, as if the universe were quietly judging my every plan. I glanced at the wall clock, seconds ticking steadily, and thought about how quickly the day would pass if I didn't make something happen. And somewhere between hope and frustration, I realized that this wasn't just about a dinner. It was about showing Mom that she mattered, about reclaiming a little joy in a house that sometimes felt like it measured love and approvals and permissions. That I remember the exact moment it happened, the words dropping into the kitchen like ice cubes in a boiling pot. I had finally worked up the courage to bring up the dinner again, trying to sound casual, like it wasn't a big deal, because, of course, I didn't want to start a fight. I was thinking we could take Mom out tonight. Make it special, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, feeling the warmth of my coffee cup anchor me for just a second. Dad looked up from his newspaper, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly, and for a heartbeat, I thought maybe he'd surprise me. But no, we can't just throw money around like that, he said, calm but firm, the words sharp enough to sting. And just like that, the air in the room shifted. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading across my ribs, and I felt this strange mix of disbelief and hurt. Did he really just say that out loud? Was it really about money? Or was it about control? About making me feel small for even thinking I could give Mom something that mattered? I sat there, mug forgotten, coffee cooling in my hands, and stared at him like I'd been caught doing something wrong when all I wanted was, well, this. That I tried to argue, softly, carefully. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's just dinner, Dad. Mom's birthday. But the words barely registered. He shook his head and returned to his paper, the sound of it rustling like a slap in the quiet kitchen. The frustration I'd been carrying all morning suddenly amplified, twisting into this simmering anger I wasn't sure I knew how to control. My hands fidgeted with the edge of the table, fingers tracing invisible patterns, and I felt small and foolish all at once. And then the flash of memories hit me, sharp and vivid. Last year, her birthday had been another quiet night at home. We'd eaten reheated leftovers and pretended it was enough. Mom had smiled, of course, she always did, but I remembered the way her eyes flickered toward Dad, this silent question that went unanswered. The memory stung, like salt on an open cut, and I realized I was tired. Tired of the disappointment that seemed to hover over every attempt to do something right. Tired of planning for someone else's rules instead of her happiness. That I took a deep breath, tried to steady the knot in my stomach, and stared out the window at the soft light spilling over the street. The world felt calm, indifferent, while inside me a storm of frustration churned. Maybe it was ridiculous to care so much about one night, one dinner, but I couldn't help it. She deserved more than quiet acceptance. She deserved joy, and if Dad wasn't going to help, well, then I'd figure out a way myself. That I still remember our last Sunday together, years ago, before the weight of everything became so obvious. Mom had insisted on making a birthday cake from scratch, her flour-dusted hands moving with this quiet determination that always amazed me. The kitchen smelled like sugar and vanilla, the kind of warmth that wraps around you and refuses to let go. I watched her hum softly to herself, singing a tune I barely recognized, her eyes crinkling at the corners in that way that made the world feel safer, softer. Dad had been busy with something else that day, as usual, and I remember feeling a pang of frustration then too, but it was different. That frustration was small, manageable, overshadowed by her laughter and the simple joy of being together. I see it clearly now, the tiny card she made for me when I was younger, the way she always remembered the little things that nobody else noticed. There was a birthday when it rained so hard that we couldn't go anywhere, and she didn't care. We stayed home, windows fogged with condensation, and she turned a simple dinner into an event, telling stories, making jokes, lighting candles on a pie she had whipped together with whatever was left in the pantry. That's the thing about her. Birthdays, they were never about grandeur. They were about presence, love wrapped up in quiet rituals that meant more than anyone could measure. And yet, somewhere along the way, those Sundays became fewer, quieter, weighed down by the unspoken tension in the house. I remember sitting at the table, staring at her face as she blew out candles that barely flickered, pretending everything was perfect while I felt the corners of my chest tighten. It hurt, even then, but I didn't know how to fix it. I just wanted her to feel celebrated, to feel seen, not the kind of performance Dad deemed acceptable, but real. Every flash of memory made the anger and frustration from today pulse stronger. I realized that my plans weren't just about one birthday dinner. They were about honoring every little moment she'd ever given me, every quiet Sunday, every small smile. The memory fades slowly, but its warmth lingers like embers. I can still smell the vanilla, still hear her laugh echoing through the kitchen, still feel that tiny, impossible hope that someone would finally see just how much she deserved. Sitting here now, the sunlight spilling over my coffee, and the hum of the refrigerator in the background, I realized that if I didn't act, if I didn't make this birthday hers in the way she deserved, it might just slip by like so many others. Unnoticed, uncelebrated, that I was pacing through my small apartment, phone in one hand, coffee long gone, when it hit me. I have a restaurant. Not a tiny corner cafe or some fleeting idea, my actual restaurant. The thought landed like a spark in dry wood, igniting something I hadn't realized I'd been holding back. Power. Agency. The ability to create a moment, a night, a birthday that could belong entirely to Mom. My chest tightened with excitement. But there was also that familiar edge of anxiety, the little voice whispering, what if it doesn't work? What if it's too much? What if Dad shows up and ruins it? I pushed it aside. For once, I had a solution that didn't rely on anyone else's approval that I started running through the possibilities in my head. Candlelit tables, her favorite dishes made fresh from scratch, the soft hum of music in the background that didn't need to compete with any tension in the air. I imagined her walking in, surprise flashing across her face, laughter spilling naturally from her lips. I could almost see it, the steam rising from the plates, the smell of roasted herbs, the warm glow of the lights bouncing off the polished wood. My fingers itched to start planning, to take every little detail and make it perfect. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a steady drum that felt like permission to act. And yet, even as the excitement grew, there was a sliver of doubt. The nagging thought that maybe this was audacious, almost ridiculous. But then I remembered every quiet, uncelebrated birthday we'd ever had. Every time Mom had smiled through disappointment or pretended things were fine just so the rest of us wouldn't feel bad. This was my chance, not just to make her happy, but to rewrite those small, silent failures. The idea of taking control felt intoxicating, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to Dad's limitations. I was creating something new, something intentional. I sat down at my kitchen table, notebook open, pen poised. The ideas flowed faster than I could write. Table settings, menu planning, subtle decorations, even ways to make it feel intimate and special without announcing to the world that this was all my doing. The air seemed thicker now, heavy with possibility, and I realized that the spark wasn't just about a dinner. It was about finally saying, I can do this. I will make her happy. And somewhere between the thrill and the anxiety, I felt a strange, quiet hope blossom, a hope I hadn't felt in years, that this birthday could finally be hers, entirely hers, and I was the one who could give it to her. The planning stage was a strange mix of exhilaration and anxiety, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind tugging at your sleeves. I spent hours mapping out every detail, pacing between my apartment and the restaurant, jotting down notes, tasting sauces, testing desserts, imagining how everything would look under the soft glow of candlelight. The little things mattered, the angle of the napkins, the exact shade of the tablecloth, the flicker of light against the polished silverware. Every choice felt like a silent promise to Mom. I will make this night unforgettable. And yet, with every passing moment, the anxiety crept in. What if Dad found out? What if he ruined the surprise? My chest tightened at the thought, but I pushed it aside, focusing instead on the little victories. The way a row of candles could transform a table, the scent of fresh herbs that seemed to bloom through the kitchen, the small clatter of plates testing their weight in my hands. I imagined her walking in, eyes widening, mouth forming that delicate "oh" of wonder I'd memorized from past birthdays. That vision was enough to keep me going, enough to drown out the tiny, nagging doubts that whispered, what if this isn't enough? I made mental lists of every dish she loved, every subtle preference she had, from the softness of the bread to the sweetness of the dessert. I rehearsed how I would greet her, how I would hide my own excitement so the focus stayed on her. Each step was measured, meticulous, but beneath the precision was this raw, bubbling hope that maybe, just maybe, I could pull this off. I checked the clock obsessively, watching as the hours slipped past, each one tightening the knot of anticipation in my stomach. Even the ambient details weighed on me. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the restaurant kitchen, the soft flicker of overhead lights, the subtle scent of cleaning solution and spices mingling in the air. It all felt cinematic in a way, like a movie scene unfolding just for me. A quiet world in which I was the director, the set designer, and the narrator all at once. There was no room for mistakes, no margin for error, and that pressure made my heart pound harder, but also made every little success feel electric. By the time evening crept in, the restaurant had transformed into something unrecognizable from its usual self. Candles flickered in perfect rows, plates gleamed, music floated softly through hidden speakers, and every detail whispered, "She will see this, she will feel this." I stood back for a moment, took a deep breath, and let the weight of what I had created settle over me. The anxiety hadn't disappeared, but it had morphed into something sharper, clearer: determination. Tonight, Mom's birthday would be hers, and I was going to make sure it was unforgettable. The moment she walked in is burned into my memory like a photograph I can't unsee. I had the lights dimmed just enough for the candles to cast warm halos across the tables, the soft music barely filling the quiet hum of the restaurant. When the door swung open, I froze for a second, my stomach twisting with nerves. And then I saw her. Mom. Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and confusion, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop around her. I could almost hear her inhale, sharp and quick, as the flicker of candlelight danced across her face. "Surprise," I whispered, my voice barely above the hum of music. Her hands went up to cover her mouth, eyes glistening, and the tiny gasp she let out was everything I'd hoped for, and more. She laughed softly, almost in disbelief, and in that moment I saw the weight of years melt off her shoulders. The tension, the unspoken frustrations, the quiet compromises she'd made for so long. They all seemed to vanish as she looked around the room that I had transformed just for her. Dad lingered at the edge of the scene, shifting awkwardly, a subtle frown tugging at his mouth. I noticed, of course. I always notice, but I didn't let it pull me out of the moment. Mom was here, in this little bubble of warmth and light, and nothing else mattered. I watched as she traced her fingers along the edge of the table, touching the folded napkins, the carefully placed candles, her smile growing with every step. The faint smell of roasted herbs and baked bread filled the air, mingling with the subtle hint of vanilla from the dessert I'd baked that morning. Every little detail mattered to her, and seeing her recognize it, that recognition was electric. That I tried to stay calm, to let the moment breathe, but my chest was pounding, my hands shaking slightly as I watched her take it all in. She leaned over and hugged me tightly, murmuring something about how she couldn't believe I'd done all this. Her warmth pressed against me, grounding me, reminding me why every late night, every anxious thought, every whispered plan had been worth it. Dad's presence faded into the background. I didn't need him to validate this night. It wasn't his moment. It was hers. As she finally sat down, still smiling, still wide-eyed, I let myself exhale for the first time in hours. The restaurant felt alive, almost breathing, with every flicker of candlelight reflecting in her eyes. I realized in that moment that sometimes the simplest gestures, the ones made with love and intention, carry more weight than anything else. And tonight, every detail, every ounce of effort, every little spark of hope I'd clung to, it was all for her. And it was perfect. That I noticed Dad the moment he stepped fully into the room. He lingered at the edge of the celebration, his posture stiff, jaw tight. He didn't say much, he rarely did, but his presence carried this undercurrent of judgment that prickled the back of my neck. I could feel it in the way he shifted from foot to foot, the subtle clench of his fists, the slight frown that didn't quite match the rest of the scene. It was frustrating, knowing he could cast a shadow over this moment, even without a word. But I refused to let it. Mom was here, fully present, glowing in the candlelight, and that's where my attention stayed. That I watched as she laughed at something small I'd arranged, her eyes sparkling in the warm glow, completely unaware, or perhaps intentionally ignoring, the tension just a few feet away. My chest swelled with protective pride. This was her night. Dad's discomfort was his own problem, not ours. Still, a little voice in the back of my head couldn't help but notice the way his gaze flicked toward the table, toward the carefully arranged candles and plates, like he was trying to measure the effort I'd put in against some invisible standard. It made me grit my teeth, this quiet comparison, this unspoken competition that never needed to exist. For a moment, I imagined confrontation, words sharp, voices raised. But then I looked at Mom again. Her laughter, the way she leaned slightly forward in her chair, the way her hands lingered on the folded napkin I had placed just so. I couldn't let anything spoil it. I let my anger simmer quietly, tucked behind a smile, using it as fuel, instead of letting it explode. Dad's subtle resentment was a background note in the music of this night, one that I could acknowledge without letting it dominate. And then came that flash of reflection, the memory of birthdays past, the quiet ones where Mom had smiled through disappointment, where I'd watched her accept less than she deserved. That memory, paired with the scene before me, steeled me. I realized that control didn't have to mean confrontation, and care didn't need validation. This night was ours, the night I had chosen, the night she had earned. I reached over and gently touched her hand, feeling the warmth, feeling her gratitude in a way that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Dad could stay in his corner. This was our victory, quiet but undeniable. The restaurant had settled into a comfortable rhythm by the time we all sat down to eat. Candles flickered softly, casting long shadows across the table, and the subtle hum of music wrapped around us like a quiet embrace. I watched Mom take her first bite, eyes closing slightly as she savored the flavors, and a quiet swell of pride and relief filled me. This was what I had wanted all along. Not recognition, not thanks, not approval, but this simple, tangible moment where she could feel loved, celebrated, and seen. That I found myself drifting inward, thinking about everything that had led to this night. The tension with Dad, the frustration, the months of planning, the sleepless nights wondering if it would all be worth it. I realized that for so long, I had measured my efforts against someone else's rules, someone else's approval. But sitting here now, watching Mom laugh softly at a small joke, I understood that what truly mattered wasn't meeting anyone else's expectations. It was creating moments of real connection, even if just for one night. The aroma of roasted herbs and baked bread lingered in the air, blending with the faint sweetness of dessert I'd baked earlier, and each scent felt like a reminder that effort, love, and intention have weight, even if no one else notices. I glanced at Dad across the table. His frown softened slightly, though he remained quiet. And strangely, that didn't matter either. The focus wasn't on him. It hadn't been for a while. This was about the small victories, the acts of care, that rippled quietly through someone's life. That I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the candlelight on my face, the hum of the restaurant enveloping me. I realized I had learned something important. I didn't need validation to do what was right. I didn't need to fight or argue or convince anyone else. I just needed to act with intention and love. And in doing so, I had created something real, something memorable, something that would stay with Mom long after the candles had burned down. Sitting there, watching her smile, I finally felt that sense of quiet fulfillment I'd been chasing all year, the knowledge that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the most weight. The restaurant had emptied, leaving only the soft glow of candlelight reflecting off the polished tables. I stood for a moment, letting the silence wash over me, the hum of the night outside faint against the walls. Mom had gone home hours ago, her laughter still echoing in my mind, her smile lingering, like a warmth I could carry with me. I ran my hand along the edge of a table, fingertips tracing the memories of the evening. Every carefully placed plate, every flickering candle, every little detail I had orchestrated with hope and love. In that quiet, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The tension with Dad had faded into a distant background, something I acknowledged but no longer let dominate my thoughts. I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval to do what was right. Love wasn't measured by permission slips or silent judgments. It was measured in moments, in effort, in the quiet ways we choose to show someone they matter. And tonight, I had done that. I had given Mom a birthday she would remember, a night that belonged to her and her joy, not anyone else's rules or opinions. Yes, I locked the door behind me and stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights flickering softly around me. I felt a small, triumphant smile tug at my lips. There was still complexity in my family, still tension to navigate, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of agency. I had the power to create meaningful moments, to act with intention, to celebrate love even in the shadows of conflict. That realization, quiet but undeniable, was worth more than any approval I'd ever sought. Walking down the empty street, the faint scent of night air mixed with lingering spices from the restaurant, I let myself hope. Hope for more birthdays celebrated with intention, more moments claimed for love rather than compromise, more small victories that mattered. And I knew this wasn't just about one night or one dinner. It was about setting the tone for the way I chose to live, the way I chose to care, the way I chose to step forward in my own power. Mom's happiness, her smile, her quiet joy, it was a victory I would carry with me always, a reminder that sometimes love is best expressed quietly, deliberately, and fiercely, even when no one else notices.